All right, what's going on, guys? It's Trader here, and you're watching Trader CFB. We're starting on a new channel, and I've been wanting to do this for a while, actually, finally getting it started up. And where better to begin than with number 20 Penn State heading to Columbus to take on the number 5 Ohio State Buckeyes at night. It's a primetime game. The Buckeyes are scarleting out the shoe. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, and it's a really interesting game, a little bit lost in the luster with Penn State's performance last week, but I think there's a true chance for Ohio State to have its moment on a national stage and a real chance for a team that's really fighting for nothing to lose in Penn State to go out there and make a statement. Anything could happen in this game. We've seen the last couple of years, great series of games. Ohio State loses off that blocked field goal in 2016, comes back, has that amazing fourth quarter in 2017. And in 2018, you had the game that came down to a 4th and 5 halfback draw call that really could have gone either way. Not quite so close the last couple of years, but nonetheless, it's always an interesting series to watch. And we could be looking at a guy who is either coaching for his job or checked out and really doesn't care what's going on anymore. Before we get into this video, though, make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these game breakdowns, as well as leaving a comment. Tell me you like what I'm saying. Tell me I'm an idiot and I should stop talking. Or, tell me, suggest a couple games. Won't necessarily get this full film breakdown, the full video, but I would love to do, take a look at Michigan State. Wake Forest has a big game this week against Duke where they could really lose in any spot. North Carolina, UNC, so many good games in this week 9 slate. Leave a comment. Let me know which one you guys want to see something about, and I could put up a TikTok or YouTube short just talking a little bit about that game, trying to figure out a side. You can either look at what I've got or you can fade that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this game at hand. And I think the best place to start is with a Penn State offense that was anemic last week. They couldn't get anything going against the Fighting Illini of Illinois. Brett Bielema completely locked down Penn State. And I think that's a real issue if you're James Franklin coming into this game. My key matchup, as you guys can see now, is Jahan Dotson, who I think is far and away the best player on this Penn State roster, going head-to-head against true freshman Denzel Burke, who has been the shining star of the Ohio State defense thus far. Burke, he's having a heck of a year himself, less than 1 yard per coverage snap, 45 passer rating against. He has a pick, really should have 2, and also dropped 1 against Minnesota. So there's plenty of opportunities for this young guy to go in and make his impact felt on defense going against Jahan Dotson, who is kind of underappreciated on a national stage, to be honest. He's got 49 catches, 563 yards so far this season, as well as 6 touchdowns. This guy's accounted for 43% of Penn State's 2021 passing offense, and it's clear to see why. He's truly the most talented guy on this roster, and I absolutely believe that. And while I think that this is a huge matchup and a great test for Burke, I don't have any faith in the guy throwing Jahan Dotson the ball, whether that be Sean Clifford or the backup Taquan Robinson, who came in against Iowa and laid an absolute stinker. Wasn't close, didn't look like he could throw the ball 10 yards down the field. You're not going to be as productive a receiver when you don't have that solid quarterback play. Sean Clifford banged up, but wasn't doing great as is. He's going to play this week, but to the extent of where he's able to provide the most help for this offense is on the ground. And if you're hurt, you're not going to be able to be that mobile and be able to take some of those hits in the rushing game that would allow you to create that passing game with Dotson. It's just going to be a tough matchup for Dotson, maybe not even to the fault of his own, but Burke, great test. He hasn't gone against someone of this caliber yet this season. And I think if he wants to shine as that true CB1 for the Buckeyes, as well as maybe, the next Jeff Okudah in what's been a great line of defensive backs at Ohio State, this is a huge opportunity for him to jump into that role early as a true freshman. I mentioned the quarterback play, but this Penn State offense hasn't been able to run the ball either. There's been just 118 yards per game rushing, and the stud guy who was looked at as, one of the top guys in the Big Ten coming into this year, Noah Cain, just 78 rushes for 245 yards. There's no consistent production from this rushing attack, and Sean Clifford's your second guy in rushes, and you've got similar numbers coming from your backup, but there's not going to be that solid attack. And we saw that this weekend. They couldn't overpower Illinois. So even against an Ohio State defense in a front seven that's been pretty bad in comparison to expectations this year, I'm not really seeing that contrast point where they're going to be able to find an advantage and just run right at that against Ohio State. It looks like it's going to be a tough situation for Penn State. And I'll be interested to see what James Franklin and Mike Yurachek are able to figure out to come in and, maybe exploit something, maybe bring out something that we haven't seen from this Penn State offense to this point. And Lord knows they're going to need it if they want to move. The last point I want to touch on in this Penn State offense versus Ohio State defense, I think that the Ohio State defensive line came into this season with high expectations. Zach Harrison was being mocked as a top 10 guy, despite really not showing any reason for that projection coming into this season. They came in and laid a couple eggs. Minnesota didn't look great. Oregon looked horrendous. Tulsa even looked very, very bad under Kerry Combs' control. And, the coaching staff has adjusted. Matt Barnes is now calling the plays. Kerry Combs has moved back into kind of that secondary coach role. And you're seeing a ton of improvement from this defense. You're seeing Haskell Garrett lead that charge. The true freshmen are coming back and helping out as well. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimalau, as well as Tyleik Williams. And Zach Harrison's getting his name in the mix, not putting up those top 10 pick numbers that you would like to see, or that were maybe being projected earlier on in the season, but you're seeing a consistent rush and a consistent ability to put pressure on a quarterback. That's going to make it so much easier for your guys on the back end. And with Denzel Burke playing better and Seven Banks coming in and having a role on this team, Cam Brown, you're seeing a lot more production from this defense in terms of turnovers, in terms of forcing stops that you just weren't seeing earlier on in the year. And I think with how poorly Penn State's offense has been going, that's going to be a real issue for them in this game. And with us talking about Penn State's offense against Ohio State's defense, we need to go ahead and take a look at the other end of things. And I think there's going to be one real, not necessarily question mark, but one real interesting focal point of this game. And that's what Travion Henderson's going to be able to do for Ohio State out of the backfield. He came into this season, a lot of hype, but people weren't sure if he was going to be able to overtake Mayan Williams, overtake Master Teague in that rotation. And it didn't take him long at all. Henderson is now, in my opinion, the best back in the country. You've heard that from a couple guys. I know Brandon Walker over at Barstool has been saying that for the last week or so. Doesn't necessarily have the numbers that Kenneth Walker or Bijan Robinson are putting up, but he doesn't have the carries either. He's been going out and putting up great averages. He's got 693 yards, 14 total touchdowns on just 7 carries, or 79 carries, excuse me, not 7. Those are insane numbers. And when you see they're coming from a true freshman, it makes you really nervous for the next 2.5 years, because if you're going to see this production, then what's next? And this is with him hardly getting any carries, hardly playing any against these really poor teams on the schedule. Penn State's defense was supposed to be a strong point, and it is much better than the offense, but this team gave up over 300 rushing yards to Illinois last week. That's Illinois. What are you going to do against one of the most talented running backs in the country? And it's not just Travion Henderson in this game. You've also got Master Teague and Mayan Williams, who I mentioned before. Both would be starting at most other schools in the country. It's just they end up behind a true freshman of Henderson's caliber, and they provide that insane 1, 2, 3 punch that you're going to be able to wear defenses down with. And I think a defense that got worn down, played in the least exciting 9 overtime game ever last week, is going to have trouble stopping the run. But the buck doesn't stop there. This Buckeye defense, or this Buckeye passing game, is truly elite. The Buckeyes have the best offense in the country, and it's clear to see why. There's 3 Heisman finalists within this offense. CJ Stroud, who started off terrible, I'll admit, I didn't know that he was the guy through those first couple games. It appears he's healthy now, coming off that shoulder injury, and he does look to be the guy. And he's a guy that I think is probably going to win the Heisman, because there's been no true standout outside of him. He's now second or third in odds. And that's once again not necessarily playing the same amount that these other guys have. Missed a game, hasn't been playing for the entire 4 quarters of these games. And he's still been pretty dominant. 1,965 yards, 22-3 touchdown interception ratio on a pretty good completion percentage. And a lot of that's come outside of those first couple of weeks where he was struggling. I think with these marquee matchups, you could see him, you could see Henderson, or you could see another guy who somehow is being underappreciated in this offense. Chris Olave came into the season as wide receiver 1, is now being mocked as 3, 4. I don't understand that. I think Olave and Wilson are clearly the 2 best receivers in this draft class, assuming they both declare. I think Arkansas's Treylon Burks is third. But regardless of that, you've got 2 guys for Ohio State that are leaving after this year, most likely, going to be first-round picks, most likely. And you've also got a third guy in Jackson Smith-Njigba who's gone out and put up true superstar numbers. You talk about subtraction and you lose Jamison Williams in the offseason, and people are wondering, hey, who's that number 3 going to be? We found him. It's JSN. And he's been putting up similar number. I mean, Wilson and Olave are right there with each other numbers wise. And then JSN is as good as any number 3 in the country. And behind him, you've got guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., you've got Emeka Egbuka, you've got Julian Fleming, who's been very underappreciated, as well as one of the best tight ends in the country in Jeremy Ruckert. So there's just so many weapons for not only Penn State, but for any team in the country to take a look at and have to try to figure out ways to stop. And you have to pair that with the fact that Penn State lost their best defensive player in PJ Mustipher. It's going to be a tall task for this front 7 to bounce back, and I'm just not quite sure they're going to be able to do it. With all that analysis out of the way, I think it's time for some bold predictions, as well as my game score. Ohio State right now sits on Wednesday night as a 18.5 point favorite, as well as the total being set at 60 points. I think those are probably fair numbers for Vegas to have out. I already mentioned this guy a little bit. I think TreVeyon Henderson is going to go for 200 yards for the second time in his career. He had that monster game against Tulsa, broke the freshman rushing record. I don't quite think he gets to that 280 that he would need to break it again against Penn State. I think there's going to be some kind of a workload management if this game gets out of hand the way I think that it probably will. But nonetheless, I think going over 200 against a defense that just gave up 350 yards to a inferior offense, you're going to have real trouble stopping one of the most talented guys in the country. As well as that, the Ohio State Buckeyes have right now 6 500-yard games in a row. I think, this is truly one of the most special offenses that we've seen in college football. And that loss against Oregon really, I don't believe, is representative of what the talent that this team boasts can provide. And I think we'll see that down the stretch. But in this game, I think they're going to break that record. I think they're going to advance and have their 7th straight 500-yard game behind at least 200 rushing from TreVeyon Henderson, probably a couple more from the other running backs, as well as a huge receiving day for that receiving core of Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr. will probably get some meaningful snaps after the performance he put on last week against Indiana. Jeremy Ruckert, you have to mix him in there. And I also think what Ryan Day has proven over the last couple of weeks is that he's not going to let up if there's some animosity between teams. And outside of, Ohio State and that team up north, and Ohio State and Michigan State and Ohio State and I guess this year Indiana because of some events from last year, Ohio State Penn State is as big of a grudge match as you'll find in the Big Ten East. And I think that's probably going to contribute to maybe a couple more scores for the Buckeyes in this one. And finally, I think the Ohio State defense has its true coming out party on a national stage, is able to hold Penn State under 300 total yards for its 3rd straight week. And I also think they're going to force 2 turnovers. I think that Burke-Dotson matchup is interesting, but you've also got those other corners on the outside going up against receivers who haven't quite been able to find their groove in this offense. and you've got a hurt Sean Clifford throwing. And, if he goes out of this game, I think Taquan Robinson could have 3 picks himself. I think his performance against Iowa was that bad that anything could happen in this game if Clifford leaves. And even with Clifford in it, I don't think Penn State really has a great passer at quarterback. I don't think they have a great rushing attack. They're going to get behind early. It's going to force some deep throws that are going to end up being mistakes for the Nittany Lion offense. Those are my bold predictions for this week. You can call them as bold as you want. If you want bolder, let me know next week, and I'll try and figure out. Leave a comment about that down below. Before I give my final score prediction, make sure you guys do like and subscribe to this video. I'm going to be trying to do these at least once a week for a couple games. And like I said, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, follow me on Twitter for all that information if you guys want to see those kind of lesser tier games. But in this one, I think if you've been listening to what I'm saying, I think you can probably gather a score prediction here. I think Ohio State's going to roll in this one. I think they're going to come out as a true top 2 team in the country on a national stage this week. They haven't had that national stage outside of week 2. One thing about young teams is that they get better as time goes on. And I think we've seen that with CJ Stroud, with Travion Henderson, with this defense who's largely made up of younger guys in that front 7 as well as in the secondary. This is a huge opportunity for the Buckeyes to put the country on notice and make their case for the college football playoff. And I think they're going to take full advantage of that. I have the Buckeyes coming away with a 52-10 win over Penn State. So that would be Ohio State minus 18.5. And then just over that 60-point total. You might see a little bit of variation there between those scores, but generally, I think this is going to be a blowout for the Buckeyes. I think it's going to be a multiple score game. And I think that everything I'm looking at just doesn't give me any reason to think otherwise in this one. That's going to do it for us here. One last time, make sure you guys do like and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy this video. But until next time, I'm Alex Trader, and this has been Trader CFB. I'll see you next time.